Good evening and welcome to Attleborough Academy's evening about succeeding at GCSE. Traditionally we would have done this in the hall, we'd have invited all the parents of children who are just starting their GCSEs in, typically late September, early October once things are settled down, and we were hoping that the restrictions would lift a little bit this year and maybe we could do that in a socially distanced way. Clearly with us now going to a second lockdown we can't, so I'm afraid you'll have to put up with not being able to see me in person. The good thing is that this is a recording and therefore you can afford wind through the boring bits, or the bits you've seen before if you have a child who's slightly older and you've already seen this presentation before. Okay, so my name is Mr. Barnes, I'm the Deputy Principal, and these are the three things we're going to focus on this evening. We're going to look at how GCSE has changed since you or I took our GCSEs back in the past. We'll look at what we will do as an academy to support students and parents, and we will look at how you as parents can support your son or daughter to make sure they do the best that they can. Okay, now I always come back to this point that around probably quite a long time ago now, 7 or 8 years ago, I was driving along in the car and I was listening to the radio and there was a scientist being interviewed who'd done a study, and what she had found was that people with more money were happier than people with less money. Now the interviewer kept coming back to this because she didn't like it, and she was saying, yes, but I know lots of wealthy people who aren't very happy, and I know some very happy people who haven't got very much money. And the scientist said that's absolutely true, because it's not the money that makes you happy. What the scientist said is that her study had shown was that choice makes you happy. Flexibility about what you do makes you happy. People with more money tend to have more choice because they can choose to spend the money on a new car or a nice holiday or a bigger house, and people who are short of money don't have much choice because they have to spend it on what they've got to spend it on, therefore they are less happy. It's not the money that's making you happy, it's the choice. Having good sets of qualifications gives young people more choice about what they do. They may choose not to use those options, they don't have to choose to go to university, they might choose to do something totally different. That's absolutely fine, but having the choice itself makes their life better. Okay, so we're now comfortably into the new look GCSEs. And the new look GCSEs are the ones where we have a number from 1 to 9, where 9 is the best, whereas opposed to in the old days where we had A star to G. And I think, obviously we need to be careful to understand that when you and I did our GCSEs, they were a different thing than the GCSEs we're doing now. The first thing that's happened, and this is absolutely a deliberate decision from the Department for Education, is that they have raised the bar. They have made GCSEs more difficult than they used to be. And that's not teachers sort of moaning and complaining, that is a deliberate decision they set out to do. Okay. The first thing they've done is they have put the content, the stuff that we actually study, is harder. They have taken stuff that used to be just left for A level and they have put that down to GCSE. You can see this. This is from Ofqual, the organisation, you've seen them in the news a lot over the summer. Ofqual, the organisation who set the exams, have said there is more demanding content. That's a deliberate thing that they have done on purpose. Okay. The other thing they've done is they've made them linear, which means that the exams tend to be at the end of the course, whereas in the past we had courseworks and things like that went well along as we went through. There are still 1 or 2 subjects that have some practical elements, but almost all subjects now have most of their exams at the end. So even geography, which traditionally, for example, would be associated with coursework, now you still do a piece of coursework, but you have an exam about the coursework at the end rather than doing a piece of coursework and handing it in. So we have more content, we have more stuff that we need to deliver. The stuff we have to deliver is harder, and we have these linear exams where almost all the exams take place at the end of the year. Okay. To go with that then, as mentioned, very few subjects, apart from these ones on the screen in front of you now, have a practical element. I just mentioned that earlier, but basically almost all subjects are entirely assessed on the exams at the end of year 11. So in June or July of year 11, maybe even May, students sit down, they take an exam, and they do that. To go with that, and I mentioned it earlier, there is the new grading system. So we go from 9 to 1, and you can see here how they line up. So it's not that A star is replaced by 9. 9 is a super grade on top of at A star, and they're talking about the top 2 or 3% of people in each exam getting a 9. 8 is still lining up with A star. 7 and A are about the same. So they have subdivided the very top categories, A and A star, into 3 smaller categories. Okay. Also, newly introduced is the concept of a good pass and sometimes called an awarding pass or standard pass. Just to go back to that, so a good pass is a 5 or above, a standard pass is a 4 or above. This is also part of raising the bar, that 4 is the equivalent to a C, and some courses we used to say, you know, you want to get certain jobs, you need to get so many C's and things like that. If you want to go on so many training courses, you want to get to certain places at college, you need so many C's. And the idea the government have is that at least some of those courses and jobs and opportunities will move that bar from a C to a 5 rather than moving it to a 4. A 4 is the equivalent of a C. So they are saying that they need things to be harder. Also, while we're talking about grades, one of the other things that goes with that is that they have calculated the grades in a different way. When I took my GCSEs back in the past, grades were calculated by the exam board set a pass mark, or a grade boundary it's called, for each grade, and they said everyone who gets over 92% gets an A star, everyone who gets between 85 and 92 gets a A, and so on, and they worked their way down. 63% is a C. They tweaked those up and down a little bit. If they thought the paper was slightly easier this year or slightly harder this year, they'd move those grade boundaries up or down 1 or 2%. But basically, they set the paper in such a way that everyone who got over a certain grade got a certain mark got a certain grade. This year, these new ones are different. What they have done this year is they have just said the people who are top in the top 2 or maybe the top 3%, depending, will get a 9. Okay, so if you were in a year group that performed particularly well, you will have to do amazingly well to get a 9. If for some reason there was a year group that performed badly, then you would have to do less well to get a 9. And it's a bit like running a race in the Olympics. In effect, in a long distance race, if the person who crosses the line first gets a gold, it doesn't matter how fast they actually run it, as long as they cross the line first. And you get that in the Olympic final. You get some years where they go slowly and they pace themselves and then have a very fast last lap or something like that, and that's how the person gets the gold. Other ones where somebody sets off fast and stays fast all the way around, and that's how he gets the gold. Either way, the person who crosses the line gets the gold, and it's a similar thing. The person who is in the top 2% gets a 9, and it works its way down the other grades as you go down. It doesn't matter what everyone else has done, as long as you're in the top 2%, you get your 9, and each grade boundary below that, so the top, they won't tell us what the other grade boundaries are, but let's say the top 6% get an 8 and the top 12% get a 7 or whatever it is. What that means in practice, which again is a deliberate thing the government has done, is just like world records in athletics, the grade boundaries will effectively keep moving. As teachers get better at teaching the new courses, as they get better resources, as they get more experienced, they will do better, their students will learn more, their students will perform better in the exams. But of course that's happening to all students, and therefore the speed you need to go to win the race, or the score you need to get your grade that you're aiming for, will constantly therefore just incrementally move very slightly every year, probably. Okay, now that's interesting for this year. It's interesting because we have no way of knowing how COVID is going to affect what everybody else does. Some people will do well. There are some people who like to sit quietly at home and do loads and loads of work. They will have got some good training done. There are some people who are not very good at doing lots of work and will do badly unless they've got teachers constantly motivating them. We don't know what the speed you're going to have to run to win the gold medal is. All we know is that the best thing to do is do the best you can, which is always the case, to be honest. Finally then, as mentioned earlier, we've got this concept of good passes and standard passes. I think I've been through that enough actually earlier. Okay, the long short of these grade boundaries, to go back to the beginning, is that the higher your grades are, the more choice you have, and we know from the scientists, therefore the more happy you should be, the lower down, the less choice you have. In particular, the 3-4 boundary makes a massive difference. There are loads and loads of courses and careers and college places and all these things that are available to people who've got 4s and are not available to people who've got 3s. And there's no negotiation on that. So, you know, if you want to join a particular organisation and they say you need to have a 4 in English and a 4 in maths, which is a very common thing to ask for, you can't write a good application or do a good interview or whatever it is and get past the fact that you've only got 3s. If you've got 3s, you don't get into the first, you don't get in the door, you can't start. So 4s do open doors. That's my catchphrase. I haven't got a very good catchphrase for 5s, so I've got 5s come alive. There is another layer, it's not as dramatic, but there is another layer of options that come available to you with 5s. So students who are looking at getting quite a lot of 3s, who maybe could get a 4 if they really put their foot down, but they're sort of cruising along at 3s, they have a massive incentive to move to 4s, because if they can get to 4s, they'll make a big difference. Again, 4s who are nudging towards 5s, 5s will again give them a load of extra options. To be honest, if you're 6s and you're thinking about 7s, it is advantageous. It's always going to look good to have 7s rather than 6s, but it doesn't open doors generally in the same way that the difference between a 3 and a 4 is. Okay. So what do we do to support our students when they're in school? Well, the first people to talk to is subject teachers and subject leaders. So if you are concerned or you're worried or you want some extra help, then talk to your class teacher first. They're the people who know the students best, and they know where they are and what they're doing, and they should know the weaknesses and the strengths and everything like that. So they're the best people to talk to first. You can also talk to form tutors if you've got a concern that goes across many subjects. So if you've got a concern that's just about geography, talk to your geography teacher. If you've got a concern that goes across many subjects, then talk to the form tutor, and they take a bigger picture and understand what's going on across the lot. If you have got still concerns, you can talk via your form tutor or go directly to Mrs. Jones, who is the head of Year 10. She's a progress leader. Her job is keeping an eye on the progress of the students in Year 10, and she'll follow them through into Year 11, and therefore she is a good person to talk to if you have overall concerns about the progress your son or daughter is making in several different subjects. Also above Miss Jones is Mr. Stott, who is the Key Stage 4 Progress Director, so he oversees the progress leaders for Key Stage 4, and also is the student support team. They're very good, particularly for emotional support and things like that. And then there is me, I'm the deputy principal, and I have responsibility for student progress. So right at the end, if you've still got concerns, you can come and see me. Okay. One of the things we do then is we send home tracking sheets, and these will be slightly different from the ones you've had previously in Key Stage 3. Tracking sheets have some useful information on them. They have a thing we call a target grade. Target grade is what we're aiming for as a target. The target grade has been set to be in the top 20% in terms of progress for each student. So it looks at your starting point, the student's starting point, and it says if this student made progress in line with the top 20% of students in the country, this is where they'd end up. Now, I could talk for hours about different ways of setting target grades, and it's a very difficult balance to get right. Because you could say, I don't want to put them in the top 20% of students' progress, I'm going to put them at the national average students' progress, and they'd get a slightly lower target grade. The problem with that is, but then it's not particularly aspirational. Most parents probably want their children to do better than average. Most children want to do better than average. Most people want to do better than average. So we need to set it a bit higher. But we could set it, we've got another figure for what they'd get if they were in line with progress in the top 5% of the country. On the other hand, if you set that, then perhaps a lot of students would look at it and say, there's no point, I'll never achieve that, and give up straight away. So we've gone for top 20% as a attainable but still quite stretching target. The school as a whole, on average, has exceeded that in the past, so it is entirely doable at Attleborough. The highest we ever got was in the top 19%, on average across all 140 students in the year group. They averaged top 19% of the country for progress. So, you know, you have teachers there who are capable of doing this, and some years we do that. So these are attainable. So if your son or daughter says this is impossible, I'll never get that grade, well, you know, other students do. The next other crucial piece of information we give you is a predicted grade. So this is what your teacher, The target grade comes from a computer. You know, the computer doesn't know your son or daughter at all. The predicted grade comes from your son or daughter's teachers and says, if they continue working about as hard as they are now, I think they're most likely to get this grade at the end of year 11. So I'm looking at this child I've got in front of me here, and he's just done a couple of tests, and both those tests he's got a 4. He's working quite hard. I think that, you know, coming towards the end of year 11, he might work a bit harder and we'll have done some revision, so I think he'll get a 5. And they'll put down that. Or maybe they'll think, I can't ever see him getting more than a 4, I'll put him down as a 4. Or these 4s were just blips, I'm sure he'll do better in the real thing, I'll put him down as a 6. Whatever, the teacher thinks carefully about that, and then the teacher discusses it with their line manager, and the line manager will challenge them and say, why have you done this one? Well, okay, I looked at these tests, and I looked at this, and I looked at that, and I took this into account, and so on, and they put down this predicted grade. Okay? So obviously, the next logical thing to do is to compare the predicted grade with the target grade. If your son or daughter comes home with a list of predicted grades that are as good as or better than their target grades, then I think you can safely say they're doing really, really well. If they're in line with their target grade, they're in line with pupils making top 20% of the country. If they're above their target grade, then they're better than top 20% of the country, and I think that's something to be praised. If the predicted grades are consistently well under the target grades, then you've probably got a problem, and you need to have a think about why, and more importantly, to be honest, what you're then going to do and what the student's going to do to try and help with that. And those people we talked about earlier, intervention people like Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Stott, one of the biggest things they look at students' predicted grades, look at their target grades. If you've got a student who is well below their targets in lots of subjects, then that's the sort of person we tend to focus on in terms of offering support. So we sent home a document that looks very similar to this. And the document that looks like this, then, is we tried to keep it as simple as possible, has 3 things in it. The first it has, or 3 main things. The first it has is their attitude to learning. How hard are they working? 1 is brilliant, 2 is pretty good, 3 we need to improve, 4 we've got a concern here. Okay, so we've got your attitude to learning on the side there. Secondly, as mentioned then, we've got the predicted grade. What do we think they're going to get? And finally, we've got the target grade. Now, both the predicted grade and the target grade are divided into fine grades. The predicted grade is divided into fine grades, not the target. The predicted grade is divided into fine grades. And you need to be aware of how this works. If you are predicted a something A, that means the teacher is saying that they are confident that you're going to get that grade. So if I put down 6A, I think this student is going to get a 6. Of course, there could be a disaster and they don't get a 6, but as far as I can see it, I think that by far the most likely result is a 6. Maybe on a good day they'll nudge into 7, but I think they're a really good solid 6. If I put 6B, then I think there's a good chance they'll get a 6, but it's a bit dodgy. It could easily go wrong. It is not by any means a nailed on 6. Could well end up as a 5. So I'm worried about 6Bs. If I put 6C, then what I'm saying is, I think just about on average, I think they'll scrape into 6. But it could be a 5, and it's about 51-49. It's a 51% chance it's a 6, it's a 49% chance it's a 5. It wouldn't take much to go wrong at all for it to be a 5, and I'm very worried. Okay? Now, one of the things you can do when you've got this information, of course, as a parent and as a student, and as a parent guiding a student, is you can work out where to focus. So we could look at this pupil here, and we could look at his or her target grade, and we could look at English language as we do it. So this pupil, her target grade, or his target grade, is 5 for English language. The teacher is predicting a 6C. Now, you can look at this whichever way you like, and I would look at it in a grade by grade way if I was a parent. What the teacher's therefore saying is, I think they'll probably just about scrape a 6, but they might drop down to a 5. In fact, there's a very good chance they'll drop down to a 5. Now, you could say, look, a 5 puts them in the top 20% of the progress in the country, so let's just leave English language as it is, because on a good day they'll get a 6, on a bad day they'll get a 5. 5's still very good, it's in line with the top 20%, I'm happy with that. Alternatively, you could say, ooh, I'd really like to get a 6 for English language. I'm only on a 6C. 6C is a bit ropey. I'm going to really focus on 6 on the English language and try and move that up to a B or even an A, because there's not much difference between a 6C and a 6A, and I really want to get that 6 solid. I really want to make sure I get that 6. Okay, that's a tactical decision for the young person and parents and possibly their tutor or teacher to have a discussion about. If we look at this person here now, next one down, English Lit, the target grades are 5 again, predicted grades are 5A. So how do we look at this? Similar conversation. Do we say, well, 5A means you're definitely going to get a 5, you're going to be in line with national, that's really good. Sorry, in line with the top 20% of the country, that's really good. Or do you say, 5A, ooh, you're only a smidge away from a 6, let's see what we can do to move that into a 6, and then say, gosh, that way you've got a good chance of getting a 6 in both Englishes, and that would be a really amazing way to go forwards. Looking down this list further, next one, Maths, 5A, target grade 5, predicted grade 8A, brilliant, amazing. I'd probably leave that alone there. I think you're doing amazingly well there. You're out punching way above your weight. Keep up the good work. Lots of praise. Let's do that. Okay. And then so on. I'd probably work my way around the list. I mean, this student here in particular, they have got, this is a real student, they have got predicted grades generally significantly above their target grades. If this was my son or daughter, I'd be taking them out for a pizza tonight to say well done. And we can see why. They've got attitude to learning of 1 or 2 in every subject, and that hard work is paying off, and they're doing well there. Okay, so well done, that student. Obviously there are other students where you have predicted grades significantly below the target grades, and we need to have a look at why that is. Okay. We also have on there their attendance. Attendance has been statistically proven over and over again to make a massive difference. You need to remember that if you miss a lesson, the teachers don't cover that again. So if you miss 2 or 3 lessons because you have a week off, if you're ill, obviously you need to be off. But if you have a week off and you miss lessons, basically you're going to try and catch it up on your own. They will give you the materials, they'll give you the resources, but it's not as good as being in a class. And all the statistics say people who have large amounts of poor attendance do less well. It's undoubtedly true. Okay, we also have on here the positive and negative symbols, and again that's a good sign that this student, as you might imagine, has got lots of really good symbols, no negative symbols, because they're a very hard-working, conscientious child, and that hard-working conscientiousness is paying off in terms of their grades. Their target grades are a bit above national, a bit above average. Average is 4s and 5s, they're getting all 5s. Their actual outcome is going to be really good. It's 5s and 5s, 6s, 7s, and an 8. Okay. Right. We haven't done them yet this year because of the disruption around COVID, but we will start doing them soon. One of the things that we do is a thing called review windows, where teachers sit with small groups normally, maybe individual students, and they talk in detail about what that student needs to do to move them to a next level. So it might be you're running at 5A, here's what you need to do to get to a 6. It might be you're running at 5C, here's what you need to do to secure that 5 and try and move it to a 5B or even a 5A. I'll put this picture here because this is Johnny Wilkinson on the right, arguably the greatest ever, or certainly one of the top greatest ever kicking players in rugby ever. And I love this picture because this is Johnny Wilkinson looking at his hairline fairly late on in his career being coached. He is the world's most successful kicker apart from maybe one, and yet there he is, somebody explaining to him how to do it and him learning. So if he at his level can still need coaching, then I think we can all take some support from people who know what they're talking about. So review windows shows the student what to do, where they are now, and what they need to do next. It's normally recorded in the front of their exercise books, so they've got it written down, this is what I need to do next. And it's particularly useful because there are some students who are working hard, they've got an ATL of 1 or 2, and their progress doesn't seem to be doing as well, doesn't seem to reflect that. So maybe their target grades are better than their predicted grades, even though they're working hard, which is different from that pupil we looked at earlier. When that is the case, it's about working differently, not working harder. And in particular, review windows are really useful for saying, okay, you're working hard, but we need to change the way you're working. And if you think about an athlete, if you were an athlete and you were training and you went to your coach and said, I've been training and training and training and I'm not running any faster, your coach would say, well, we need to change your training program then. They wouldn't say keep doing more of the same, it hasn't worked for the last year, try doing more of it. They'd say, okay, so that system isn't working, let's try change it. And this is something that teenagers sometimes find hard. They say, well, I'm working really hard, but you're not working right. You can't be working right if you're working as hard as you can and you're not making the progress you should be. So listen to us, we're the experts, we know how to do well, we've done it ourselves, and we've guided literally thousands of pupils through it. So listen to us and we'll help you. We'll give you things like revision guides coming into the real thing. We'll do lots of mock exams. We'll do a revision skills day. We'll have a revision portal on the website where loads of stuff is, and we'll do pre-exam sessions. So every exam, we get them in the mood basically by bringing them in sort of 3/4 of an hour, maybe an hour before the exam, and running through a few key things and a few key reminders. We're not doing the revision. They've been doing that for weeks and weeks beforehand, but we will do that as we go, as we come to the real exam. So we put a lot of effort into getting this right. So while we're on it, I just did want to have a quick word about this concept of progress. I've used the word progress a lot today, and I just want to make sure that we're clear about it. Progress, if we look at these people here, here's somebody who came into the school with a junior school score somewhere around the middle. Typically, somebody who comes around the middle should come out getting a combination of 4s and 5s, like I mentioned earlier. That would be the national average. This person here came in low and has got nearly the same. They've got 3s and 4s. They have made more progress. Although the middle person has ultimately got slightly higher grades, I personally absolutely believe that that person there, the blue line, started lower and ended up almost the same. They have made more progress. They should be the one who is most proud. This person here came in high. Looks like from this arrow, they didn't put that much effort in. They cruised and they ended up getting 5s, maybe a few 6s. They, of the three of them, should be least proud, I would say. Even though they've got the best final results, actually they have made the least progress. And it would be just like me, who is not particularly fit, taking up running. If I progress from being able to run a few kilometres to running 10 kilometres, I have made loads of progress. My friend who already runs 10 kilometres at the same time moves from 10 kilometres to 12 kilometres, they haven't made the progress that I have. I would be incredibly proud of moving from a few to 10. They perhaps wouldn't be so proud of moving from 10 to 12. As a school, we tend to focus on progress more than outcomes, and that's absolutely true. And I love praising students whose target grades are 2s who are getting 3s, and that's just as important, in fact probably more important to me than target grades of 8s getting 9s. But somebody whose target grades are 8s and getting 6s and 7s, they're not making a great deal of progress at all. They don't get as much praise as someone who's moved from 2 to 3s, even though ultimately 6s and 7s are a higher grade than 2s and 3s. That's where we focus. So that's most of our intervention work, most of our support work is done around progress. Okay. The only bit, by the way, where we look at the grades as well as the progress is particularly around those grade boundaries, around the 4s, 3s, 4 boundary, and to an extent the 4-5 boundary, particularly in English and Maths, just because it makes such a difference, because there are so many courses and colleges and jobs that say you need a 4 in English and a 4 in Maths, and people who are nearly at 4 in English and 4 in Maths, it makes sense to focus on moving them to a 4 if we can, or helping them move to a 4. Okay, what can you do as a parent and carer to help? Firstly, take an interest. Keep an eye on what's going on. Ask them. Secondly, look at the books, and remember there's the review windows in the front of the books. One of the things about review windows is they only really work if the student remembers to follow the instructions. So if they've got an instruction saying, I don't know, always check your working, or always use a variety of tenses in your language work, or whatever it is, they need reminding sometimes to do that. We'll try and do it in lessons, but it'd be useful if you could do it at home too. You can help them, assist them with their homework. That doesn't mean doing homework for them, but absolutely helping with them their homework, even if it's helping with them get on with it, even if you don't know the answers yourself, then that is very helpful. Thank you. We set homework for a reason. I often say this to students. Some students think we set homework just to be nasty, but we set homework because it's important. If we didn't think it helped, we wouldn't set it, because it takes, every homework generates a lot of marking. So we don't want to do it. We do it because it's useful and it's important, and it's teaching useful skills as well about discipline, for when you come to do those revision things at the end of the year. Please do discuss tracking sheets and reports with students, you know, with your son and daughter. Sit with them and say, oh look, you're on a 5A on this, what should we do to move that to a 6, or things like that. Help them think tactically through it. Help them set ambitious yet realistic targets. You could sit with them and say your target grade's a 6, but I think you can do better than that. Or you could sit with them and say your target grade's a 6. I know that actually that's not your favourite subject. Let's prioritise one of the other ones and move that target up and leave that 6 alone, or not to worry too much if it only comes out as a 5. Those are the sort of tactical decisions that you need to have that perhaps is more difficult for us to have. And another big thing that makes a difference, and again is proven statistically, is a healthy lifestyle. So encourage them not to work all the time actually. They need to be outside and having some fresh air. They need to be eating well. They need to be coming to school with enough food in them to keep them going, and they need to be coming to school not exhausted because they've been up half the night doing something on the computer or playing games or whatever. Those things make a dramatic and measurable difference. Okay. Finally, if you've got a concern or a problem, let us know. We don't always know. We can't tell what's going on inside the child's head in the same way that you perhaps can when you see them so often in a different environment. So please let us know if you've got a concern, and we will look into it and do our best to support you. Okay. One practical thing you can do, which has been proven to have the most effect, is this concept of frequent low-stakes testing. Scientists have worked out basically that the way things get lodged in your brain is if you nearly forget them and then you remember them again. So what you can do is basically it's just quizzing. It's fun. There's nothing radical riding on it. It's not an exam. It's not an end of unit or an end of year or whatever like that exam. It's just a little bit of thing, perhaps with a flashcard with the questions on one side and the answers on the other. But just ask those questions just like you would do if you were getting ready for I don't know, a quiz or an appearance on Mastermind or something. Just ask lots of short questions about the topic, so you can get a textbook and say, what does this word mean, or when did this, or how much is that, or how do you work out, just little questions like that, and then leave it a few weeks before you ask similar questions again. Okay, so that idea of giving it some time to forget and then bringing it back forwards is critical in terms of helping them remember. It's got a fancy name if you want to look it up. It's called retrieval practice. It's about helping your brain sort out where things are and how it's going to retrieve them from the back of your head somewhere. Okay. We'll give you these things called knowledge organisers. This is a particularly pretty one, but they're not always as pretty as this, but they are good. They are lists of what you need to know. Fundamentally, we give the students these. If they learn everything on here, they will do really well. This is the knowledge. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean if you learnt this off by heart, you could score and get a 9 in every subject, but it will be a hell of a long way to helping you do that, and certainly give you a lot of structure to do that. Okay. Here's a slightly less pretty one, but again, it's these key terms. So this could be easily turned into that low stakes testing. If you had this knowledge organizer in front of you and you say to your son or daughter, what is authoritarian leadership? And they say, it's when one person makes the decisions. Correct. Or the other way around. You could say, what's the style of management where one person makes a decision and hopefully they say authoritarian. Okay? It doesn't actually matter if you don't know the answers, because you've got the answers in front of you. So it doesn't matter, I don't really know anything about business studies, where these ones are from. You don't need to. This will help you do that by giving you the questions and the answers. Now, the last little bit from me is, I've mentioned it a couple of times already, maybe more than that we need somebody to be our children's coaches. And coaches strike a really careful balance between motivating and encouraging and telling what to do and picking people up when it's gone wrong and pushing them to go harder when it's appropriate to do that, and so on. And that's what children need, and that's one of the reasons why some parents are very good at supporting their children, because they're very good at acting like a coach. Now, this man is the guy in charge of the Sky cycling team, or was, and the UK GB Olympic cycling team. And he talks about marginal gains. He says it's lots of little things that add up. So if you can make the bike 1% faster, if you can make the cyclist 1% fitter, if you can make the tyres have 1% less rolling resistance, then suddenly you've got someone who's 3% faster and they're going to get a gold medal. Okay? So he calls them marginal gains, these little tiny changes that add up and make a big difference. And absolutely, I think that's what we need to do. And I talk to the students about this quite a lot. We know, just like the Olympic teams, we know where we're going to be. We know that in the May, June, July of year 11, your son or daughter will be sitting down doing their exams. And what sports teams do, particularly the Olympians where it's so obviously fixed, is they then work backwards and they have a program of what they're going to do in the run up to that. And that's exactly what we can do now. And definitely things that you would do 18 months out, to a year out, 6 months out, are going to make a difference to what happens at the end. If you've got that knowledge stored down, if you've got good quality sets of notes, if you've done well or tried hard in your practice exams and therefore got good quality feedback about what to do, then all of that helps you move forward. And undoubtedly, students that work hard all through the years, I mean, it's blatantly obvious, people who work hard all the time do better. No doubt about it. Sometimes we get students saying, I've got no homework, and occasionally that does happen. If they've got no homework, then they can do this. They can go on GCSE Pod, which is brilliant. It has lots and lots of carefully well-structured videos. They're often 2 or 3 minutes long, so they're not too daunting. Watch those. There's a program called Seneca, which takes that low-stakes testing to a computer-driven level. It's very clever the way it distributes questions and so on, so that can do that low-stakes testing for you, so get them to go on to Seneca. BBC Bite Size, again, has lots of very carefully put together little videos, extracts from educational programs and things that can help. And actually, YouTube does as well, and lots of wacky and crazy teachers and students put things on YouTube that are very good and relevant. And, you know, they have silly songs about cliff erosion or whatever it is. So, I just wanted to have a look at some of the things that we can say and do as coaches. I know you know your child better than we can, and that gives you a massive advantage in the coaching. I often will deliver what I hope are motivational speeches to them, but I'm giving the same speech to all 150 students. They can't possibly be the right one for each student, so you can get that right. So these are the sort of some statements that often come from young people that I've heard hundreds of times and I've had a chance to work out the answers to. So I'm going to share you what I tend to say when I get these questions. So I get some students say to me, some people are cleverer than others, they're smarter than me. He's going to do better than me than I am because he's cleverer. Well, the answer to that is you need to be the best you can be. And if I look at myself, going back to my earlier example, I will never be as fast as Mo Farah, however much I changed. But I can be a lot faster than I am now, and that would be something to be proud of. If I got to as fast as I can go, then I think I should be pretty proud of that, even if as fast as I can go isn't as good as fast as Mo Farah can go. But your brain is like a muscle. If you exercise it, it gets bigger, it gets fitter, and it works better. Okay, here's another one. I've tried this and I failed. So something typically would be, I tried revising for exams once and I still didn't do very well, so there's no point, I give up. Well, that comes back to what we mentioned earlier. Then failure is a learning opportunity, and this is exactly what sports teams do and sports people do. So I was watching a thing about the All Blacks the other day, the most successful sports team in any discipline ever throughout history. So the All Blacks, when they finish a match, including when they win the Rugby World Cup final, the first thing they do is sit in a circle and work out what to do better next time, before they do anything else. You know, they go do a quick lap of the field, wave the cup around, and then in they go, what to do better next time. So what we need to think of is, if something went wrong in your mock exam or your practice exam or your end of unit test or even that piece of homework, then what went wrong? What do I need to do differently? Do I need to do revision in a different way? Do I need to concentrate on getting the key phrases right? Do I need to make sure that I read it through at the end? I don't know, it depends, but I can use this to learn from. And to be honest, it's okay to keep failing as long as you get it right for the last one. You can see failure as the first attempt in learning. Okay, that's how we learn, and that's how you learn when you learn to do something really complicated. When you learn to walk when you were a child, when you learn to talk, you learn to do them by trying it and failing it. When the child is learning to walk, it stands up, falls over, and gradually it falls over slightly less until one day it doesn't fall over. That's how we learn to do things. Okay. Next one. Common one. I'll have fun now. I want to do well in my exams. I definitely do want to do well, absolutely, but I'll have fun now and I'll put loads of work in at the end. They need to understand, I think sometimes students are surprised by this, that the work you do now will not be repeated. So the work that the students are doing in their Year 10 class now, on whatever topic it is, we won't do it again. They might get an hour of revision towards the end of Year 11, where a whole term's topic is covered in an hour, maybe 2 hours, so it will be skimmed. But if you haven't done a very good job of it now, you don't get a second go at it with a teacher. Okay? So if your book isn't very well organised, you've forgotten it every now and again, so there's gaps in it, and you didn't bother to underline your title, so actually when you come to try and read it, it's difficult to work out where all the different sections start and stop, and you've done okay with answering the questions. I mean, you haven't gone over the top, you've put enough to get the teacher off your back, then that's what you're going to revise from. That book that you are writing in, or that booklet that you are writing in, is what you are going to revise from. And if you haven't done it very well, then you're already making your life difficult when it comes to the real thing. This is another one. I've got my end of year unit exam, I've got my end of year 10 exam, I've got my first set of year 11 mocks, I've got my second set of year 11 mocks. I'm not going to put much revision in for these, I don't need to, I'd much rather do other things like play on my Xbox. But I'll definitely do it for the real thing. I want to do well in my real thing, I'm just not ready to do it just yet. Well, firstly, if you revise when you have an end of unit test or an end of year test, whatever, then you will do that recall thing where it gets brought back to the front of your mind. You'll forget it again over the next few months, and then you revise for the next test, you bring it back to the front. The more you keep bringing it back to the front of your mind, the more likely it is to get stuck there. It's much better that when you come to do your real exams in May, that you're reminding yourself of stuff that's stored somewhere in your brain, than effectively having to start from scratch because you haven't brought it back to the front of your mind and wedged it in there previously. Secondly, this is a common problem. One of the things, and it is like sports teams, is that the students who don't revise, they assume when they don't do very well in their exam, well, that's because I didn't really do much revision, which is probably true. What they don't get to find out is which revision technique works for them. They think, well, it's okay, I'll just wait till May of the year 11, then I'll do loads of revision, it'll be fine. But what if May of year 11 is when you first discover that the revision technique you'd assumed you were going to use was not the right one? Or what if you discover that in fact you don't know the difference between describe and explain, or you don't know how to pace yourself in an exam or whatever? You won't be able to practice how to be in exams if you don't know the answers, because you'll just assume I didn't do very well because I didn't know the answer, but it might be more than that. So don't leave it to the last exam to do your revision. This is a bit like sometimes at half time at football matches, players come out and practice penalties. They practice it deliberately to do it under that high stress environment of having a crowd looking at them, so that when they come to do it for the real time, they know what it's like and they've got it as close as possible to actually having to take a penalty that counts. Okay, another coach phrase, common one. Something outside of my control has made it not my fault. Or I would do better, but. This is the one I hear the most. Here's the reason why it's not my fault. I would do well in my exams, but my parents are going through a difficult divorce and it's really upsetting me. I would do well in my exams, but I haven't got anywhere good to work at home. I would do well in my exams, but I've not been very well recently. All these things, they are all perfectly valid. I am not suggesting that these things won't have an impact. They absolutely will have an impact, and you wouldn't be human if they didn't. However, when you look at successful people, if you read biographies of successful people in business or sport or relationships or whatever it is, they have always had to overcome obstacles. We've all had to overcome obstacles. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes those obstacles have set them back and made their life harder. What successful people do is to overcome those obstacles. What less successful people do is to see that obstacle as a reason why they can't do it and then stop trying to do it. Okay? That is probably the most common comment I get. It's not my fault. I would have done well, but. Okay? Richard Branson super successful businessman, owns his own airline, owns an island that he rents out to royalty, can barely read or write. He's massively dyslexic, really struggles to read. When he goes into a big meeting to buy jumbo jets or whatever it is, he has to have a person with him who will read the contracts with him to make sure he understands them. So he could say, like him or love him, he could say, I'd really like to be a super successful music executive and then move into owning my own airline and bank, but it's not my fault, I'm really dyslexic, so I won't. Or he could say, this is going to make my life more difficult. It is going to be harder than it would otherwise have been. It's going to make my life tricky, but I'm going to find a way around it and I'm going to overcome it. Okay, and that's what we need to do. Doesn't mean it's not a problem, and those things I mentioned earlier are difficult and will hold people back, and I'm not suggesting they shouldn't. You wouldn't be normal if they didn't make your life difficult. The question is whether you're going to let it be the excuse or whether you're going to do what you can to reduce the damage it does. Okay, here's another one. It's boring. I don't want to do the revision. It's boring. Sometimes important things are. That often important things are. Parents have sat here and listened to me droning on for a long time, hopefully because they think it's important. Probably hasn't been very entertaining. Important things sometimes are boring and hard, and that's just the way it goes. Then the last thing I want to talk about is being the right coach at the right time, and it's something that parents find difficult to do for obvious reasons, that they love and want to support their children. I'm not going to go into massive detail now, but the broad two types of coach which seem to work well are mild anger, so not the full-on screaming in people's faces of Alex Ferguson, but mild anger and sympathy. You need to work out where to draw the line between those two. Sometimes sympathy is the right thing to do. There, I'm sorry that your exam didn't go the way you'd meant it to do. That does sound really tough. I feel for you. The problem with doing that all the time is that you build a thing that says it's okay to keep doing badly, and then you say there all the time, and you'll say there forever. If you want your child to do the best that they can, it probably isn't best to every time say, don't worry, it doesn't matter, it'll be all right next time, because at some point it won't be all right next time. It doesn't mean it's not time to say it. Sometimes it is exactly the right thing to say, and you know your child better than I possibly can, and at times that will be entirely the right thing to do. On the other sort of edge of the spectrum is mild anger, which says something like, well, of course you didn't do very well in your exam because you didn't really put any work in, did you? I want you to do better next time. Pull your finger out and do something about it. I'm going to sit and help you. I'll write a revision timetable with you, or I'm going to test you for 10 minutes every night, or whatever it is. We will get this sorted, but I am a bit fed up with you've done so badly, and I think you need to be fed up with yourself too, because you let yourself down there because you spent all your time messing about and you didn't really do anything in your exam. Now those are two extremes, and you need to get the balance right somewhere in the middle of those two extremes, and different students will respond in different ways. But just be careful not to go too far down either line of those, because you need a balance of the two, and you need to get the right balance between yours. Okay? Sometimes students need to be protected and reined in. There are many students out there for whom all of this is very, very stressful and very difficult, and they're frightened, and they need to be protected, and sometimes they need to be controlled in the amount of work they want to do. We do have pupils where we send messages home saying, can you stop them doing quite so much work, because they're going to exhaust themselves and their worry is not doing them any good. So sometimes that needs to be the case, and in those cases the sort of there I want you to stop now is a perfectly very valid coach thing to do. Obviously you love and care for your children, and you can help them manage that stress as much as possible by helping them control it. It is a difficult time. It is undoubtedly a difficult time. These exams are important. I often worry when I stand up in front of Year 11 assemblies and say these exams are really important. But for some students, they're thinking, oh, okay, I better do some work then. Other students are thinking, I know, I'm working as hard as I possibly can. And, it's a difficult balance to get right between those two. So you need to help your child. Obviously, you already do love and care for them, and try and help them work out ways to control that stress, to manage stress. And then I just love this quote: don't dream of winning, training for it. And I do this talk to year 11s with this very, very tough message. And I say to them, it's hard. One of the scary things about these exams is that by far the biggest factor that's going to make a difference to how you do is how hard you work. And one of the easy things to do would be to convince yourself, and probably your mates too, that you don't care. Say, oh, I don't care, I'm not going to do anything. And then you won't do anything, and of course, that way you won't fail, because you'll say to yourself, well, I didn't really try, therefore I didn't really fail. Just like, I don't know, asking that girl out, or putting yourself for the sports team selection, or the audition for the theatre, or whatever it is. If you don't audition, if you don't apply for that brilliant job that you really fancy, you won't get that job, but you won't fail either. You won't get rejected. And it's a good way of protecting yourself, but it's also a good way of ensuring that you don't really achieve your full potential. So one of the things we need to try and get across to students is that they need to train for it, and if they train for it, they will do better. There's no bones about that. Nobody's going to say, if I work hard, I will do less well. I mean, you just need to make sure that message is always